Hello, everybody. So, gonna be doing another quickie little React video here. Different channel this time. This is a channel that I've been familiar with for a couple years. I remember them coming across my YouTube recommended some years ago and kind of binging a bunch of their videos then. But seemingly they're still active because this came across my recommended, a few weeks ago at this point. A few weeks ago at this point. It's by a channel called TierZoo, and kind of the shtick of TierZoo is it uses a bunch of kind of video gamey type of terminology to, discuss mostly animals. I feel like I've seen them do plant ones and stuff too, but it's mostly animal stuff. And a lot of the times, kind of the shtick of it is that you're organizing different animals or groups of animals into tiers in a similar way that you might for a fighting game or whatever. This seems like it's not going to be one of those videos where he's not necessarily going to be sorting a bunch into tiers. It seems like it's kind of a specific one. You can probably see the title in the top left corner there. It says, "Are Scorpions OP?" And I got to say, just starting out here, my initial instinct is no. Scorpions are absolutely not OP. When I think of something that's OP, something that's overpowered, in a video game context, generally what I'm thinking of is something that is centralizing to the meta. It's something that when you're thinking about the viability of other things, one of the first questions you have is okay, how does it relate to this thing? So that's what I mean when I say centralizing. I mean it's prominent to the point and effective to the point that when you're thinking of the things around it, you're thinking of the things around it in relation to them. And I don't know of any place where scorpions are that thing. Maybe he'll have some information for me here that I'm not aware of. I'm not a scorpions are not necessarily a group of animals that I know a ton about. I've never worked with them and at any point in my career, really. But if you were to just have me gut check this, be hey, what tier of animal are scorpions right now? Sort of in the context of how hard do they get owned out in the wild versus how much owning do they do of other species? My initial gut instinct on it is that they're probably low tier, if not full on trash tier. I was thinking about this before I, hit the record button. And I was trying to think of a single context in which I would rather be a scorpion than a spider. And I don't know if there is one. I think scorpions are just bad spiders. But like I said, maybe TierZoo's got some insights here that I'm not thinking of that'll provide some rationale for making a video questioning whether or not they're not only not trashed here, but in fact potentially OP.
Scorpions are one of the most intimidating builds in the game. They're also one of the oldest, and have been in the game since before the devs even added the terrestrial server DLC. Their combination of powerful claws and deadly stinger create an imposing threat to anyone looking to challenge them in combat, but has their ancient strategy held up in the face of the immense...
He's making a claim here. He said two things. He said powerful claws, deadly stinger. I mean, powerful obviously is a very relative thing, and I don't know what he's saying relatively speaking, how powerful they are. Because if you're going to be if you're thinking of it in sort of a predator context, yeah, you need to be, it helps to be bigger and stronger than the items that you're trying to prey against. So you can have powerful claws relative to, a grasshopper, but the image we're seeing on screen right now is a scorpion versus a mouse of some description. And those claws ain't going to help a whole lot against that mouse. Like, you're just going to lose to that mouse if you're relying on the claws. And then the deadly stinger, right? That was the adjective used for the stinger, was deadly. Again, sort of a relative thing where how useful is it actually, like, as a defensive mechanism? I mean, a lot of the stuff that, you know, it's going to be wanting to defend itself against is going to be like big enough to either have the venom like not be that big of a deal, just like in the amounts that they can actually inject it, or B, I know a lot of stuff is just like full on immune to scorpion venom. So like the venom actually like isn't like super useful and in like a defensive context, I know. But again, probably deadly in the context of the things that it's trying to eat, which, like I said, I think is mostly other bugs. I think what they primarily eat is other arthropods.
Power creep the game has seen? Let's take a closer look at the stats and abilities scorpions employ, and ultimately decide where they fall on the tier list. This video
look back at that graphic of his tier list. Okay. So S tier, he's got humans, felines, it's like bees or wasps, or just kind of maybe general flying insect, dolphins, crocodilians, dogs, or is this specifically domestic cats? Probably because there's a lion down here. Definitely not S tier. Crows, monkeys, gorillas, hippos, definitely not A tier. Mouse, bear, no, it's not going to be up with bears, I don't think. C, we have some kind of fish, a deer, a turtle. It's like a sperm whale or some other toothed whale. Is that maybe like a trout or yeah. I don't think I would rather be a scorpion than a snake. I would probably rather be a scorpion than a frog, though. Frogs are pretty trash. I would take rhino in D tier feels weird. Like, I would definitely pick rhino over being like even a lot of the stuff that's above it here. Swan, ostrich. I think scorpion probably ends up either like way at the bottom of D tier or maybe like top of F tier. Because koalas are trash, snails are trash, cheetahs are bad. I don't know if they belong all the way down here. Cheetahs are kind of bad though. Frogs are trash. Yeah, like right, and yeah, definitely like D to F, I would say, is where we're looking. It's interesting. He doesn't have like any other arthropods on here at all, other than, you know, these bees or whatever they are up here. So, blazing new ground as far as arthropods go.
Decide where they fall on the tier list. This video was made in partnership with CuriosityStream. First, their stats. The scorpion's stats are fairly decent across the board. Nothing completely overtuned, but not really lacking in any areas other than mobility and intelligence. Their power is obviously quite strong, as the scorpion sports multiple types of damage-dealing equipment. Their claws act as potent grappling weapons, which can also deal minor crushing and slicing damage. Their venom sting is their ace move though, being able to one-shot most players if the move connects. Big if there, but we'll come back to that. Their defenses are quite sturdy, though they sport the fairly standard chitin armor found in most arthropod builds. This is all they really need to be able to deflect most attacks from players within their own weight class, giving it ample time to counterattack with its piercing stinger. It gets easily crushed by larger foes, however. This armor is also crucial for avoiding passive environmental damage from things like sandstorms, which are common in the biome's scorpion main's favor. Despite the fact that humans have a way to completely negate the scorpion's camouflage, against most opponents, the scorpion's stealth is quite effective. In addition to camouflage, the scorpion's flat shape allows it to easily wedge itself into more defensible positions, and their digging ability enables them to take cover in a pinch, which is good because stealth is basically their only option against more powerful players. They have very little.
Yeah, and that's like exactly what I was saying, is that a lot of the stuff that does like prey upon them full on just like doesn't care about the venoms. Like meerkats are sort of the marquee like thing that eats a lot of scorpions. And like I said, they're full on just immune to the venom as far as I know. And like this one, I don't think they can regrow body parts. So like that one just got its tail bitten off. And so like even if it does escape, like it doesn't have its stinger anymore, it's probably not catching food very successfully at that point. Like that one's done. Like they're really, really dependent on this stinger that is kind of on a weird, like feels very fragile appendage. And as I said, it overall just like feels kind of bad to me.
Little defense against attacks from larger builds. You'd think their potent venom would make for an effective deterrent against attacks, but as we'll see, this defense falls apart rather quickly when it's truly tested. Their intelligence being below average is no surprise. Intelligence builds weren't viable at all when scorpions were first added to the game. And while it's by far the most power-crept stat in the game now, back during the Ordovician expansion, intelligence as a strategy was largely ignored, and most players didn't level it beyond the point of granting basic sensory capabilities. So with all that said, Scorpions are a solid build with a straightforward strategy and a respectable history. However, as alluded to earlier, power creep has massively undercut the viability of Scorpion builds. A good player will have very little difficulty playing around the Scorpion's strengths and exploiting its major weaknesses. So let's talk about those weaknesses. The straightforward nature of the Scorpion's strategy is great for new players to be able to learn quickly. The Scorpion's core strategy is to grapple an opponent, immobilizing them so that the Scorpion's sting attack can connect without issue. The problem is, if they miss their grapple attempt, things can get dicey pretty quickly. Without claws holding the target in place, the Venom sting attack has a pretty terrible accuracy rating. It's easily dodged, blocked, or avoided. Worse still, this stinger is not a disjointed hitbox. It can be damaged just the same as the rest of the Scorpion's body. In fact, when dealing with a Scorpion, this is the optimal strategy. Scorpion claws are fairly weak compared to other clawed arthropods. Hermit crabs and lobsters can both deal far more damage via their vice grip attacks. Scorpions rarely deal lethal damage in such a way, so if an opponent attacks and disables their stinger, it's often game over for the Scorpion. Scorpions also have very little counterplay when faced with multiple opponents. With no multi-target or AoE attacks, and no means of quick escape, they're quickly overwhelmed from a multi-directional onslaught. Their grab attacks are also not as effective as they need to be at times. Because they mostly rely on the pointed ridges of their claws to maintain grip, armored targets that can resist being punctured by these spines can often slip right out of their grip with ease.
It's interesting, like, I know they eat a lot of insects, so having like a puncture weapon be sort of your predominant way of like killing prey, and also claws that are, I said, really more like sharp than they are like crushy, feels weird when you're like trying to get through like arthropod shells. So they're a group of animals that like came up in the ocean, probably eating like softer bodied stuff than what they do now. So it even feels like in a lot of ways like they're not even like really optimally built for hunting the things that they do hunt these days. Like you can see like there's this like beetle or whatever it is behind it here. And like that's a thing that like this Scorpion is gonna like not be able to do a whole lot too, because like you're not gonna be able to puncture that because it's got this nice like hard domed shell. Basically, you're not gonna be able to get a good grip on it and crush it because you're a Scorpion and you're, you know, he said he started out saying that they have these really powerful claws, but then immediately walked it back. Was like, well, crabs and lobsters and all this stuff have way more powerful claws. Their claws are actually kind of weak, and so it's like, what do you do with this? Like if you're, you know, not only in like a defensive capacity, like if this thing wanted to hurt you for some reason, which I doubt it would, but like even if you do want to like eat this, what are you doing about it other than maybe trying to flip it over and maybe there's an area where you can get a decent sting off on it on the underside.
Not that the Scorpion had much hope of landing a sting against a target with high puncture resistance anyway. Now let's talk about matchups. First, the bad, of which there are many. The Scorpion's worst matchups are going to be builds that spec into puncture-resistant armor or venom resistance. Several mammal builds, like the shrew and mongoose, opt for venom resistance solely for the purpose of subverting the Scorpion's defenses, which makes this a borderline unwinnable matchup. The round shape of beetle armor is perfect for deflecting sting attacks, and extremely difficult to secure via grappling. Beetles tend to also be fairly lacking in their offensive stats, so it is rare to actually be defeated by one, but as a hunting target, they present quite a challenge. Ants obviously must be avoided at all costs, as scorpions have no outs against a swarming attack.
I don't think that's necessarily like a huge knock against them, though. Like, things that operate in swarms are just generally like really, really strong, and there's like not much that really has a good way of doing anything about it. Like, if you were to try and pick like one thing that's like for sure gonna like even beat like a human, like you're gonna take just like a swarm of ants or a swarm of wasps or something. Like, we get rolled by that too, and we're like definitively like top of S tier. So getting beat by swarms it ain't bad.
Birds have high accuracy on their pecking attacks and are often quite good at targeting their stingers. Their quick movement presents very little opportunity for counterattack, making this a tough matchup. Certainly not impossible though, as one hit from the stinger is likely enough to KO any bird.
I wonder what the like what's the like hit lag after it like strikes with its stinger? Like how many times can it like throw the stinger out there and miss, and like how long does it have to go between swings with the stinger? And even if it does connect, like how many stings does it actually have? Like, if you get stuck with it once, does it dump all the venom out? In which case, like, the follow-up stings are dry stings, or can it like release a little of the venom here and there? And then obviously follow-up is how long does it take to like replenish that venom after it makes it? I don't know any of that off the top of my head, but I would bet it like probably can't just like continually sting you forever. Like, if the one sting isn't enough to bring you down, like the stinger's probably pretty useless after that, I would bet.
And their feathers provide 0 puncture resistance.
Not disagree. Feathers are not bad at all as a puncture resistant weapon, especially with something that's a lot smaller than you. Like, being able to, like, yeah, they're not going to like stop. They're not going to like a puncture thing is going to go like into feather, but like having a scorpion stinger isn't going to get through a bunch of feathers just because it's not long enough to do it. Like, the actual like soft tissue that the scorpion's going to be trying to puncture like is further away than what the scorpion probably understands. So if you're stinging like the feathers, like your actual pokey part isn't actually going into like anywhere where the venom is going to do anything.
Reptiles are kind of a toss-up. An attack from a lizard or snake is usually powerful enough to deal heavy damage through the scorpion's armor. However, these attacks usually present ample opportunity for a stinging counterattack too. If it connects, it may one-shot the reptile, but not before it has already dealt potentially lethal damage anyway. Scale armor is also somewhat puncture resistant, so this, combined with the sting's low accuracy, means these fights tend to favor the reptile. For good matchups, scorpions are actually quite effective against spiders. They lack strong armor and need to get in close to deliver their own lethal strike, presenting lots of opportunity for counterattacks. Their webbing is of course a threat, but it's difficult for a spider to web down all 3 weapons, especially since the claws can slice through silk. Scorpions are also fairly decent at defending themselves from mammals like cats and dogs, as their claws cannot do much damage against the scorpion's armor, but the scorpion can easily counterattack for lethal if the mammal gets too careless. There are a few abilities I think could turn scorpions into a top-tier threat.
The claws like not being very effective against the armor feels kind of weird to me, just because like, again, and there's like a certain like weight class element to this where it's like, if a dog is like pawing at you, you're like not worried about like the scratching damage. If you're a scorpion, you're worried about getting crushed.
A more versatile grappling option would be a solid start. Their claws struggle to secure opponents with puncture resistance or round shape, both of which are fairly abundant in the current meta. But there are plenty of other grappling techniques they could spec into instead of pincher claws. the Velvet Worm's glue spray attack could work well to immobilize prey, though this might not be super effective when trying to pin a player to a sandy surface. They could spec into the sort of tether grab attack like the Chameleon uses, though this requires a level of precision and accuracy that I don't think the Scorpion's current perception perks can quite support. Scorpions could really benefit from catching up to the other arthropods who run the Compound Eyes perk, as this would really help alleviate their accuracy problem. One strat I think would work really well would be to min-max for the burrowing playstyle a bit more deliberately. The Antlion's playstyle of building a trap could be really effective, and the Scorpion is already fairly decent at digging holes. The added protection of staying out of sight would help against some of their worst matchups too. As they are now though, to be honest, I do think Scorpions have been power crept pretty hard, and that their glory days of being a top meta threat are long gone. Their powerful grab sting death combo is still quite powerful, but their strategy is too easily subverted to make a dent in high level play. I place them firmly in D tier on the tier list. Nonetheless, Scorpions are a fascinating build that I do hope eventually get buffed. If you'd like to learn more about Scorpions, there's an excellent documentary I can recommend called Animal Armor. It's part of a series called Nature's Fight Club, and this episode centers on animals which prioritize their defensive abilities. It has a substantial section all about scorpions, but also features incredible builds like the pangolin and porcupine. You can check it out on CuriosityStream, the sponsor of today's video. CuriosityStream is a subscription streaming service where you can watch thousands of high-quality documentaries and non-fiction titles, including a bunch of my personal favorites like Leaps in Evolution and Out of the Cradle. In addition, every new CuriosityStream member also gets access to Nebula, a streaming service made by and for creators like myself. I've made a few exclusive videos on there, but I also recommend some of the originals made by fellow creators, such as the Modern Conflicts series made by Real Life Lore. It's especially relevant in today's meta. To get access to both of these awesome services for only $2.99 a month, head to curiositystream.com/TierZoo or click the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks especially to my patrons on...
Alright. So he did put them in D tier. I don't know if the actual placement there is like an actual placement where he's saying they're the bottom of D tier, or if it's just they're the most recent one on there, so they got tacked on the end. But yeah, like I said, that was about where I kind of expected them to go, was low D, high F tier. And yeah, like he talked about, is like Scorpions are super cool. Scorpions are super cool. They're super weird because of, like I said, how old they are. It's a thing that very much like got its start underwater and still like has a lot of the trappings of that. It's a thing that's like retrofitted itself for being on land, and is that kind of what he was saying? Like, seems like it's not super, super great at it at this point. I like the idea of like going more into like the burrowing aspect of it. I think that would be something useful for it, because then you can also like be more of like an ambush predator than I think a lot of them actually are, where like even if you're gonna have like bad senses, like you need stuff to like you need stuff to come to you. So the way you do it is you sit in one spot and let stuff walk up towards you, and then you use your kind of junky grappling abilities to grab a thing and use your junky low accuracy stinger to like deal your damage. And then you also get to avoid all your predators because you're hiding. Hiding works both ways. Hiding from your prey items, hiding from your predators has its values. Yeah, like I said, the conceit of this video was, our Scorpions OP? My initial instinct was no. And yeah, I didn't see anything here that was like really too like deeply enlightening in such a way that would make me reconsider that. And like I said, TierZoo came to pretty much the same conclusion I did, in fact, in that they are, not only not OP, but like I said, arguably like trash tier at this phase. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that. Probably try and experiment a little bit more with some TierZoo videos. Like I said, I watched a bunch of them like a couple years ago, and I've done a couple reacts of his videos for a different channel that I'm involved with. But I haven't done them for a while, and I think he's come out with like a couple more of them that I've never seen before. So I might go back and watch some of watch some of his other recent videos, and like I said, potentially even some of the older ones that I, like I said, watched years ago when he made them and haven't seen again since. So maybe I'll do a few more of these. I like TierZoo. It's a good channel. Anyway, again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you whenever I make another video.